Welcome back, everyone. Dana and I were just talking about menage a trois, and we decided you want to give some context to that, Dana?
Yeah. So for those of you that are watching the Olympics and watch the opening ceremony, I loved it, especially because I studied French all through high school and part of college. So most of the references and a fair amount of the language I could actually pick up. It was cool. And also being a queer person and a genderqueer person, at the beginning of that actually had it's like one of the phrases that even people that don't speak French know what it means, the menage a trois. So the opening ceremonies were a lot about expressing of, if you hadn't seen it, French history, French culture, and they had a depiction of a menage a trois thing in there, which I thought, to me, as a queer person, when I see things like that, I get excited because I'm like, oh, this, the joke is always, oh, this is so good for the right wingers. And then of course there ended up being all this backlash, but it was like, shake your box out a little bit. You realize that humans do things that not everybody does, and it's okay for us to see all of that. And to me, that's a lot of, and I've found out since in reading about it, that was really the intent of the opening ceremonies, was about diversity and inclusion, right? As we know, in this country, there's a backlash to diversity and inclusion. A lot of schools, for example, are taking out DEI initiatives, saying we don't want to have this, banning certain books, non-affirming trans and gender care. So we have a lot of that there. And the topic today is religion and neurodiversity. And we want to also take a second to define the difference between, when we're saying religion, I'm meaning an organized religion, like a faith, Christianity, Mormonism,
Catholicism, Buddhism.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, all those versus spirituality, which is really can be anything. It could be that you have spirituality within one of those organized religions. Absolutely. Yeah. And it can also be you have a spirituality that isn't easily defined through one of those organized religions. Maybe it's a cultural thing that you identify with. I have found that most people that I work with who are neurodiverse reject rigid tenets of organized religion. It doesn't mean I don't work with folks that go to church or temple or those things, but the sort of the hook, line, and sinker metaphor of blindly following it is usually not the case, and you're sort of waving your head that way. So there's a lot of like critical analysis of it, what fits, what doesn't, why does this work or not work for me? There's a lot of focus on organizational oppressive systems, right?
Yeah.
The one B+ that I got in my undergrad, and I'm not going to use the F word, we had to, the school I went to, we had to take a Bible study class. I tried everything to get out of it, everything. And it's the only, I graduated with a 4.98 because of that damn Bible study class. And there was something about that I know I had like a repulsive reaction to, and this is just for me, for our listeners out there. I was raised initially Roman Catholic. I sort of, the short Cliff Notes version for when I tell people about this is, I was baptized, I had my first communion, but I never got confirmed because my parents sort of started to stop wanting to go. And I was the youngest and I never, so I'm going to hell, I'm sure, if you believe in that. But it was sort of this a basic early learning about that. But then also even from my parents modeling that there was a permission to question that. And then in school, right, one of the best classes I ever took it wasn't just a comparative religions class, but we had some parts of that in the class. And it was an eye-opener to me, more so in that there are other ways of thinking. It's not all about just the Catholic Christian way, which I finally understand now. I have my brother-in-law is an ex-Catholic priest and was here a couple weeks ago. And I said, Carl, just give me the lowdown on what's the difference between like a Catholic and a Lutheran? And he just like, boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, oh, okay. So just sort of understanding the different ideologies and why they became different ideologies in history, right? Oh,
Yeah.
these folks do believe in the Pope. These folks don't. They thought the power belonged with the masses. These guys had what humans do a lot, which is almost like a political structure. Now this makes sense to me, right? I'm like, oh, that's why that did that and that did that and that did that. And I'm like, well, what about other parts of the world though that aren't Christian? Muslim or Buddhist or indigenous people here had a different, was grounded in nature. What about those different things? And you can look back at historically and see why those are there. But then also this colonization of the earth with the white people bringing Christianity to all four corners of the earth, but not all of them, right? And that sense of learning about the history behind some of these things, to me, made me not have to be just automatically foreclosed to it. Like, I don't want to talk about it. Now, as a psychologist, I'm like, oh, this is really interesting that humans are capable of this. And why do we do this? And why do we create these systems to either oppress or just to understand the meaning of life?
Yep.
There's such existential angst in thinking, what is the meaning of my life? And if you have no spiritual frame at all, it's terrifying, right?
Yep.
Even if it's something like, yes, I'm going to go to heaven, yes, I'm going to go to hell, or ashes to ashes, dust to dust, I cease to be, but my atoms are returned to the earth, whatever it is, and everything in between. Those are things that I hear neurodivergent clients, people I know, students, myself. That's where the meat really is, right? And that's a lot of what that opening ceremony was just trying to show, that there is diversity, and as humans we move in and out of those pieces. And then the right wingers here thought that the thing they were depicting, which was actually a Roman gluttonous ceremony, they thought was a depiction of the Last Supper, and they thought it was sacrilegious. And that's such an interesting thing, because they're saying we thought this, but then the assumption is the people that were doing this, you're assuming then are Christian. Maybe they're not. And that's it. I think, again, why neurodivergence rejected a bit is the rigidity that can come from an organized religion. And we don't like that rigidity, right? It's more the former that I was talking about before, which is like, oh, this is interesting, how this happened, and I can take this piece from here and take this piece from there and put together a painting or an opening ceremony that makes sense to me, right? But maybe not to the other person. And we don't talk about religion a lot because people get all freaked out. Like, oh, we're going to have a fight. Right.
Yeah. It's a taboo topic, right?
Yeah,
It's like
politics,
it's
right?
politics, sex, money, religion. Those are things that you typically aren't like, hey, nice to meet you. So do you like menage a trois?
Yeah.
I don't know. Right. I see similar things actually with my clients as well. And I think there is, for many, they've done such a deep analysis of it that it just doesn't make sense. So there's just parts that like are too unresolved or too open, that are too, that you can't kind of, there's too many open loops in the formalized religion. But where they get excited, and where I think it's absolutely necessary to go to, is historically what is happening at the time.
Yeah.
Right? What is the global and community, state, country context of what is happening? And a lot of times that, to me, is always the most interesting piece, because just like in our conversation about normalization, a lot of times we're so focused on a detail that we don't step back and go, wait, what does this mean? Or what does this mean in the greater context of things?
Right.
Yeah. And that I find that religion for many is a coping mechanism. I don't mean to diminish religion, actually. No. What I mean by that is it does give them a frame to understand death, to understand life after death,
and I'm interested in what it means for that person. So tell me, what this means for you. Yeah.
I mean, it even gives a frame to suffering. And
or behavior. How do you motivate yourself to do something nice for someone else when you don't otherwise? Yeah. There's reasons.
It gives reasons for morality, even though those are people that I really dislike having morality conversations with. Yeah. Because it's like, I can never win against God.
Yeah.
Like if you're just going to bring up God, like I'm never going to win. So like there's no, we can't have a meaningful conversation about that.
Yeah.
But I think religion is such an interesting piece of people's lives. My religion is that in my next life, I'm coming back as my own dog.
Oh.
Because Stanley and every single pet I've owned has had the most amazing life.
Yeah, I have
I'm coming back as my own
Facebook
pet.
page that is "Dog is my co-pilot." It's like a play on that. God is my co-pilot. Yeah, I get it. Yeah,
I'm coming back. I'll come back as your pet.
okay,
Dana.
that'll work. Yeah,
I know I'd be. I mean, I'd have the best life. I mean, there's just some people. I'm like, no, I'm coming back as your pet. I don't. It doesn't matter what I am.
Yeah,
I don't. I like it. Does. I'm not. I can be a turtle. I can. No, don't make me a bunny though. They're too anxious. Like whatever. Like,
maybe you were a bunny in a past life. If that.
I could. I don't swim. Like I'm very averse to water. I swear I've drowned in a past life. I'm very averse to water. I could drown in like 3 inches. Like
And
I think if I fell in a bathtub, I'd be dead.
Oh, okay.
Dead. I'd be dead.
Yeah. Whereas my last name of Waters is Chosen. It's not my birth name because I love water so much.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I legally changed my name. God, when was it? It was like 1990. It's been a long time. And did I get flack from my family? Holy smolies. Yeah. And there was actually,
holy smolies.
A lot of organized religion trauma went into that decision. But religion's so weird. Politics is so weird in that we can have conversations with each other about like whether you like Diet Coke or Pepsi. Well, the people can get stuck in, oh, you're just wrong, versus, oh, here's why I like it. Here's why my palate likes it. And we were talking about this ahead of time. Pepsi seems a little too sweet for me. My wife really likes Coke Zero, and it has a much stronger cinnamon taste than Diet Coke. And for my super taster, it's too much. Yeah. So I appreciate the cinnamon, but it's too much. So we can talk to each other about it. Imagine if we could do religious conversations like that.
Yeah.
You say
political conversations like that.
Oh, I am a Buddhist and this is why this makes sense to me and so on and so forth, rather than, oh, I reject you because of that ideology.
Right. And I reject you because you don't believe in God.
Yeah. And they're very personal things. Absolutely. I mean, I get to as therapists, we get to hear a lot of those things that your average person doesn't when people are talking about that. And it goes very deeply. It's an organizing structure for making sense of your world. Makes sense, right? But I think the oppressive pieces around it and the rigidity pieces around it and like who's in charge pieces are what get my clients and get me going around it, right? And then now with sexism and oppression issues, I can really lose my mind. I mean, my wife and I walk around the house just talking to the air about some of this stuff. And I don't even want to tell you the things that we say out loud in our house, but not outside. Because we knew if we said them outside, forget it. It'd be bad.
Yeah.
But it seems to be this universal thing with neurodivergence that it sort of is like typical, rigid gender norms. There tends to be more of a rejection of that. I found across the board, there seems to be a rejection, just the hook, line, and sinker version of an organized religion. It has to make sense. We want things to make sense in our inner world. And if they don't, it creates dissonance. It creates a problem, right? Maybe that's some of why that's a trend as well. And I've seen this in lots of different research, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think we could do a whole episode on dissonance. And maybe we should, because, dissonance is a huge motivator of behavior.
Yeah.
And we don't talk about dissonance a lot because in order for you to know that you have dissonance, you actually need to have a good, solid foundation and sense of who you are.
Right.
And that tends to kind of be missing, I think. I think we do sometimes there's not a structure for that. I mean, I think there are some practices of spirituality that really do help people reflect on themselves and their bodies and their experience and their lived experiences and what to do. Like, so I do see that, we don't often think about, who am I? How do I work?
Yeah.
How do I work the
Yeah.
best? What
Yeah.
really sets me off? And, big spoiler alert, when there's something about someone else that sets you off, it usually says something about you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that the dissonance, hypocrisy can be things, that get in the
Yep.
way of understanding
Yep.
that. But I've done a lot of work to get to a place, and my training had a lot to do with this as a psychologist, was to not reject somebody else's frame for them,
Yep.
right? Someone says to me, "Oh, I'm fundamentalist Christian." "Oh, I never want to talk to you." No, tell me
Yep.
how that works for you. I'm actually genuinely curious about it. It doesn't mean it makes sense for me, but as two different people, we should be able to have that conversation. It's we were talking about this yesterday. It's one of the reasons why I get so bristled when someone says to me, or I see a sign that says Jesus loves you, and I'm just like, really? Because it to me it feels like now they're wanting to merge with me. They're telling me that their God loves me. How dare you? You don't know if that's my organizing structure. If they were to say Jesus loves me, I'm like, sweet. But when you say Jesus loves you, I'm like, I really want to hurt you right now. I mean, it's so, and it's
Yeah.
not just about religion for me. It's about that penetration of my sense of self, and you're having no respect for it. So I'll get in a twirl when people look at things like that, projecting onto me things that aren't true. I'm like, you are so wrong, right? Like,
Right.
but that one, sort of colluded. You talked about collusion as a culture. That even that phrase, I just want to hurt or tear
Yeah.
something up when I hear that.
It's
Yeah,
because
for
it's
that reason.
connected to your lived experiences. That's
Yeah,
why,
right.
right? It's the
Yeah.
same. I have the same bristling at those shirts or the hats that say choose happiness.
Oh, I know. Like,
Cuz
really? Don't
I'm
you think
I'm
if it were
like
that easy, we would do that?
there wouldn't be one depressed or anxious person on the planet. If it
Yeah.
really came up, oh, you mean my suicidal ideation is because I didn't wake up
Yeah.
this morning and said, I'm going to decide to be
Choose
happy
happiness.
today.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's the
Yeah.
same thing, and it's because I've supported so many people through ideation
Yeah.
and through how awful
Oh my
depressive
God.
episodes can be, and it's like,
Hmm.
how dare you?
Yep.
Lucky that you've never
Yep.
had to struggle with a mood
Right.
problem.
Right. Yeah.
And I get
Yeah.
it. Like, that's my own thing, and I would never attack someone on a street and be like, you need to take that shirt off. Like, I would never
Yeah.
ever
Yeah.
do that,
Yeah.
but I do see that bristling in myself. My haunches raise,
Yeah.
and it's really, again, I think that's my pattern is it's like this protectiveness over people that I
Yeah.
care about in my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
wow, this is so interesting, but it is, again, I think, Dana, you and I aren't saying you can't have organized religion
Right.
and you can't.
Right.
No, absolutely not. Like,
Absolutely not. Yeah.
that works. If that works for you, that works for you. How do we come
Hmm.
to this place where we can have conversations that allow ourselves to be
Yeah.
in existent and
Yeah.
existing
Yeah.
together?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
And there's so much
yeah,
historical conflict. I mean, most major human conflicts throughout recorded history have been based in religion. So we want to
yeah,
give onus to the fact of how powerful these are operating in humans, or that wouldn't have happened historically, wouldn't be happening now, right?
yeah,
It's more just for you as a person, what makes sense for you, and why do we tend to see this large number of neurodivergents say, no, and I do think it's that congruence thing and what makes sense, right? How do I
yeah,
organize my world? What makes sense to me? And there are different religions all over the world. There's a reason for that, right? There's big cultural presses to that and history that presses that. Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and look at like the way that so many of my neurodivergent clients think. It's
Mm.
very exhaustive thinking. It's
Mm-hmm.
deep
Mm-hmm.
thinking, it's critical thinking, it's
Mm-hmm.
detail oriented thinking to
Mm-hmm.
the ends. Like, and
Yeah.
so when you're uncovering an organized anything that way,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
gonna find
Yeah.
holes. You're going
Oh,
to
yeah.
find things that cannot be resolved, right?
Right.
And so I have clients who absolutely, their special loves is like history. They love history, right? So
Yeah.
inevitably they have a very big knowledge about religion
Yeah.
because
Oh,
religion
yeah.
is such a big part of history.
Right.
And to hear them talk about these things, they're so articulate and there's so much detail and they've put so much thought into it. It's like, I'm never going to go up against any autistic in their special interest. I'm just going to tell you, it's phenomenal. The depth and the robustness of that knowledge base. It's like, oh my gosh, like I admire that so much in so many ways, right? Like if I could just get a little piece of that understanding, that would unlock me in so many ways. Like I'm like, I feel so dumb talking to you, you know?
Right. And at the same time, if someone else has a less complicated, more, I'm trying to use words that aren't judging, it's hard, view of a religion, because that gives them solace. I'm fine with that. I don't have to give all my arguments and like get in there and say you're wrong, right? And it's kind of what you can tolerate. I'm thinking of before we started taping, as you know, Gwen and I both love Diet Coke, and we went on this conversation about Diet Pepsi and why we don't like that as good. But like when we're out and about and you go to a restaurant and you ask for a Diet Coke and you know they brought you like a Diet Pepsi, it tastes different. But there's an understanding when we're out and about, you deal with it. It's like, I need something to drink. It's not my favorite, but I'm going to drink it. At home, not so much. So religion is like that too. In what setting and do you say, I'm just going to deal, I'm going to roll with it? And in which setting is this the hill I'm going to die on, right?
Yep.
And religion is just full of opportunities for that. Politics maybe too. Money, sex, all that stuff.
Yep. All the taboo topics tend
we call them
to elicit that.
Don't talk about them is also another way to get people to not talk about them, and then we never grow, right?
Yeah. And we never practice. We never create spaces to have conversations. And Dana and I mean, we always welcome differing opinions to us. Our only request is that it's done respectfully. That's all. Like, but having a different opinion, like, please do. I mean, Dana and I are like, what, in our own little Diet Coke silo? Like, it's fine, you know? And so, you know, that's how we grow as a community and that's how we see each other as a community. You know, anyway. So what, how did we start, Dana? We start with religion. That's how we started this episode.
Yeah, I know. Just so that our listeners know too, we have this big spreadsheet of possible topic ideas. And this one's been sitting there for a long time before we're like, okay, is this going to be okay to talk about this? Because it's a loaded thing. So thank you for listening. And let us know your comments.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, everyone. Well, at the end of the day, be good to you. Please do. And we will catch you in the next episode. Bye.